Okay, now I'm here to talk about cryptozoology. How many of you know that word before you came in and looked at the program? Well, some of you, that's good. Cryptozoology literally means the science of hidden animals. It was actually coined in the 1950s by a gentleman, Bernard Heuvelmans was his name, and he wrote a book called On the Track of Unknown Animals. It's a big, thick book, great for doorstop nonfiction. And in this book, he describes all these creatures that are kind of, I would say, on the fringe of acceptance by science. It's a fascinating read. You can get it out of the library. I'd recommend it. Now, Bernard Heuvelmans not only created the word cryptozoology, but he established a hierarchy for the kinds of cryptids, that's those unknown animals, whether we're talking about the abominable snowman or the Loch Ness monster, or you name it. Those kinds of things out there. Some people say they exist, some people say, He actually created this nice hierarchy, and I'm going to run you through that so we're all on the same page before we get down to my favorite cryptid, Cadborosaurus. Now, there are lots of these categories, 6 basic categories. There's unconfirmed cryptids. These are things that there's like no evidence whatsoever that they exist, but we talk about them anyway. And the unicorn is my favorite example of this. There's no such thing as a unicorn. If you trace it back to the Middle Ages, Viking traders, when they weren't raping and pillaging, they were trading, were selling what were narwhal tusks, those nice long curly horns, if you will, to rich people. They're supposed to have magical powers, so of course he wanted one. But that's where that whole legend of the unicorn starts. I notice there's a really beautiful glass work out in the lobby here of a unicorn, which has that nice long curly horn. No evidence whatsoever. That would be category number 1. Category number 2 is disputed. And by that I mean there's some evidence, or some people maintain this thing exists. Other people are definitely not going there. Scientists, for example. My favorite example of this are these giant snakes. If you're like me and you like noodling around on the internet, you're going to see that sometimes you'll find photographs, supposedly, of like 100-foot long snakes in the Congo. Oftentimes they're taken by airplane. So that's kind of a nice, safe vantage point. But there's no evidence for this at all. In fact, there's actually been a reward offered by the New York Zoological Society. They're saying they will give $50,000 to anyone who can bring in a snake that's 30 feet long or longer. Sounds great. I know you're all going to run out with nets now to get that $50,000, right? Well, don't do it. That prize has been offered since 1910. Yeah. And actually, Teddy Roosevelt was one of the people who put it forth in the first place. The New York Zoological Society carried on this contest for years and years and years. I think now they've kind of closed it down because there's no evidence of a snake longer than about 28 feet in length. Okay, the third kind is proposed, and this is one I'm very personally close to. We're talking about proposed creatures. There's evidence. Science still hasn't taken the bait on that one. So Bigfoot or Sasquatch. You've all seen that film from 1968, 60 seconds worth of Sasquatch walking along. Scientists all over the world have seen this thing. It's proposed because as many people have seen it, there's a great dispute. Is it real? Is it a man in a suit? And the only agreement people seem to have is if it is, in fact, a real thing, great. If it's a man in a suit, no one can find the zipper. So that's in the proposed realm there. Now, the next category is confirmed. And I like these because it's like what was the cryptid of yesteryear is a commonplace of today. It's a zoo animal. I'm thinking of the okapi, for example. It wasn't until 1901 that someone actually shot one and sent it back. Do you know what an okapi is? It's kind of a relative of a giraffe. It lives in the Congo. It's like a horse-sized creature. It wasn't until 1901 that an explorer actually shot one and mailed it back to London, and everyone was in agreement it existed. Same thing is true with the panda, the great giant panda. 1905 was the first time anyone had seen one outside of China, a pet one. So these things were cryptids. People talked about them. People didn't believe that they existed. But now we all know, heck yes, they exist, right? Okay, on the opposite side of this, I love these two, the hoaxes. Have you ever seen a jackalope? Go to a restaurant, a diner in Wyoming or Montana, and there's this thing, it's got a head like a rabbit with horns. Do they exist? Yes. Well, I would say no. The other one, I love this one. It's the Hickens fur-bearing trout. Have you ever seen one of those? I have a postcard of this thing. It's like a stuffed trout. Some taxidermist put it on there and then got clever and put rabbit fur around it. Those are hoaxes. You know, we're primates. We like to engage in monkey business. That's our idea of a good time, right? Doesn't exist. And there's lots of that. Now, serious cryptozoologists, every time someone pulls one of these hoaxes, they kind of go, oh, it's a groaner. You know, you're setting back our whole field a little bit. And so we don't like the hoaxes. We like the real stuff, right? Okay, the next one, and probably another one of my favorites, are things that were believed to be extinct but may still exist. It's amazing to me. I saw an article recently that the Animal Planet TV channel went to the Galapagos Islands, and they actually found a tortoise that everyone thought had become extinct like 100 years ago. So there are things out there, but of course, if you're talking about things like the plesiosaur, those aquatic dinosaurs, maybe they still exist. Maybe that's what the Loch Ness Monster really is. Some people say Sasquatch or Bigfoot was actually a creature called Gigantopithecus, fancy word, for an 8 to 10 foot tall creature that existed way back when, in the earliest days of humanity, covered with fur. It ate bamboo. It went extinct. Or so they say, because now people are saying, well, maybe it actually climbed up from Asia, crawled across the land bridge into Alaska, and into the Northwest, and that's what we're seeing now. It never went extinct, it just moved. Changed postal boxes. Okay, so those are the main kinds of cryptids. I also want to say that some people say cryptozoology is a pseudoscience. Pseudoscience, that's the last thing a scientist wants to be accused of, right? I think in my book about Sasquatch, I say it's pseudoscience is basically hogwash with a light dusting of science. But cryptozoologists think otherwise. It's very hard to get scientists to stick their necks out a lot of times about this. And it's unfortunate because I think we're missing some really great mysteries to pursue. What I really want to talk about is the other word that we're working on today, the other C word, Cadborosaurus. Cadborosaurus, ladies and gentlemen, a beautiful painting of this creature. This particular sea monster, or more appropriately, let's say an aquatic cryptid, no monster in here, this thing has allegedly been seen about 300 times over the last 200 years. And where do they see it? They see it in the waters of British Columbia, off of Vancouver Island. In fact, the name Cadborosaurus comes from Cadboro Bay outside of Victoria. That's where people were seeing this thing in the 1930s. A newspaperman actually gave it the title. It's not a scientific name. They just had a little contest, name this beast, and Cadborosaurus is what won. So 1930s. And people see these things from the time to time. I may have actually seen this creature, and I will tell you that story at another talk. Okay, now what we're talking about is a creature that's very nicely described by two professors, Paul LeBlanc and John Siebert. They were oceanographers at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. So we're not talking about wide-eyed, bug-eyed science crazies. We're talking about genuine professors. Paul LeBlanc is professor emeritus now, still is into this. And in the 1970s, they wrote this great paper called, I love this, Observations of Large Unidentified Marine Animals in British Columbia and Adjacent Waters. Kind of rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? It's great to read because this thing is written in a very scholarly style. They actually interviewed lots of people. They collected eyewitness reports, secondary sightings, and even tertiary sightings. You know, someone wrote about, I heard about something. They put them all together. They got, I think, 57 of these. They divided it down. They found 23 that could not be explained as missed sightings or something else easily, discarded. They got down to 23 of these, and then very systematically, they classified. There's a theme here. I love classifying things, especially things that we don't know if they exist or not, but we're going to put them in a nice, orderly, classificatory scheme. So 3 of these, this is one of 3 types that they were able to divide all 23 of those talks into. And this creature, I would say, is romantically titled Type 2. I'm starting with this one. Type 2 has these, long neck, maybe 50 feet long. The creature itself, 3 body humps that people can see, kind of a furry covering, not scales, not a plesiosaur. A long mane, almost looks like it's made out of seaweed. Red eyes, a horse's-like head or a camel-like head, and giraffe-like horns. That's the characteristics that are common in some of these sightings, the 23 sightings. Type 1, which he leads with in the report, is pretty much the same thing, only no horns, no giraffe horn, no mane, and much larger eyes. For all we know, it could be a male and a female thing. We don't know. They're seeing these guys all the way from British Columbia down into Oregon and California. The third type, it's a creature that doesn't look at all like this. It's long. It has one fin that runs the length of its body. It has a sheep-like head, which I thought was really wild, until I looked at a picture of an oarfish. Have you ever seen an oarfish? These are up to like 25 or 30 feet in length. They're really long. They have one fin that runs along the entire dorsal area. It has a sheep-like head. It actually has like a rooster-type comb. Really interesting creatures. The mystery is, why are people seeing these in British Columbia? Because according to the scientists I've spoken to, they don't exist much further north than Southern California. If you're in the Baja, you might find one. There was one actually washed ashore on Whidbey Island in the 1960s, and it got into the Associated Press, AP reports. It's kind of a big deal. And I was kind of amazed to see in the details it said it had a rope around its neck. Is it possible that someone actually caught this thing and dragged it all the way to Whidbey Island and released it? We don't know. It's the mystery of it all. Okay, now I only have another minute here. I want to wrap up with a great quote that I got out of John Steinbeck. You know, America's one of our greatest writers. Wrote a book called The Log from the Sea of Cortez about traveling around with other marine biologists in Mexico. And in it, he talks about a possible sea monster sighting. He goes on and says, well, when someone finally does really discover it, the great shout of triumph will go throughout the world. People will go, there, I knew it was there all along. I just knew there was something. I had a feeling there was something. He then concludes with, men really need sea serpents in their personal oceans. And that's really what I think. We need mystery, ladies and gentlemen. We live in an age where you can look on your smartphone and see who played the supporting actress, and you name it, some movie from the 1950s. It's all in our little phones. We have all this information. This is the information age, but we crave mystery. I think that's really true. There's something out there. We want to know that there are things we don't know. Sasquatch is a great example. I say in the foreword to that book that I believe that we need Sasquatch way more than Sasquatch needs us. We need a belief in something that's out there that's wild, that doesn't have a smartphone or a message machine or any of that good stuff. Okay, that's really what I want to say. 3 cheers for mystery. Go out and solve those mysteries. It'll give you something to do in your off hours. And I hope to be back on the stage some other time giving more updates about Cadborosaurus. So thank you all very much.